Hi, in this video I'd like to have a bit of a chat with you about Gibson, what they've been up to and why their reputation today is the way it is. There's a lot of stuff to get through in this video, so I'm not going to waste any time, but for the sake of this being a proper documentary style video, even though you all know this, here's some quick history on Gibson. Gibson is a guitar company founded in 1902 in Kalamazoo, Michigan by Orville Gibson. Gibson quickly became known for their hollow body archtop guitars, mimicking the sort of archtop that usually you'd only find on violins before that. Since producing one of the world's first solid-body electric guitars in collaboration with guitarist Les Paul, they've become known for a variety of famous and iconic guitar shapes, most notably the Flying V, Les Paul, SG, Explorer, and 335, in no particular order. In the past few decades, however, they've gotten up to some stuff that I find hasn't been sufficiently documented all in one place, say in one big YouTube video, for instance. So tonight, that's what I'm here for. Ever since the company's inception, Gibson has always seemed to like suing other companies. Some of their arguably unnecessary lawsuits date back as far as the 1970s, so I've compiled a few right here. In 1977, a lawsuit was initiated by Gibson against Ibanez guitars for allegedly copying their archtop-style headstock. The case was settled out of court for an undisclosed sum of money. In the year 2000, Gibson filed a lawsuit against Fernandez guitars for copying Gibson's guitar designs, specifically the Les Paul, under the Bernie brand. I'm sure some of you will know the Bernie Les Paul is highly sought after but very rare these days. Those are what we call lawsuit guitars because of lawsuits like this. In this case, however, court ruled in favor of Fernandez guitars, deeming the Les Paul design at that point in time generic, because dozens of brands had been cranking out their own renditions of Les Pauls decades before Gibson even caught on. Paul Reed Smith in 2005, similar situation to Fernandez guitars, they were sued because of their single-cut models. However, court initially ruled in favor of Gibson guitars, later ordering dismissal of the case, at which point PRS immediately resumed production. See all of their single-cut models they make today. My personal favorite, a 2010 lawsuit filed by Gibson against Wowee or Paper Jams for copying the looks of famous Gibson guitar shapes in the form of battery-operated toy guitars. Case dismissed for obvious reasons. A 2017 lawsuit against Warwick, a German guitar and bass manufacturer, for allegedly copying the Flying V design, which were being sold under the Framus brand name, a subsidiary company of Warwick, however, according to Gibson, allegedly still misleading buyers and using the already damaged reputation of Gibson for their own profit. Hamburg Court originally ruled in favor of Gibson in 2017, however, Higher Regional Court in late 2020, not so much. Oh, I'm sure you're all familiar with this one, Gibson's long-lasting lawsuit against Dean Guitars, or their parent company Armadillo Distribution Enterprises, starting in June of 2019. Now, this lawsuit was for many reasons, some of which are the wing-shape headstock, a headstock also commonly used on old Check the Diamond series guitars, a company that was not sued for using those headstocks. Dean Guitar's Flying V-shape with an arguably identical V-shaped tailpiece. However, Gibson's Flying Vs had been in production since the late 1970s, and they were only starting to defend their trademark recently, so really they don't have a leg to stand on there. And the shape of the Dean ML versus that of the Gibson Moderne. And if I may add my own opinion here, the Gibson Moderne is what a Dean ML would look like if you put it in the oven for a few hours and forgot about it. Also, Kiesel Guitars was sent a cease and desist by Gibson in early 2020 for allegedly copying Gibson's Flying V and LP guitar shapes with their Ultra V and California single cut respectively. However, I couldn't actually find any useful information as to how that turned out. And last but most certainly not least, threatening Heritage Guitars with legal action despite the long-standing agreement between the two companies for their popular Les Paul style single cut models. If you don't know, Heritage Guitars is the company that makes high-end Gibson-style guitars in Gibson's old Kalamazoo, Michigan factories using all of their original equipment, since they're no longer using it. They had a long-standing agreement, yet were somehow still threatened with legal action. Now, some of these lawsuits can actually seem quite funny if you're familiar with the story of how the Les Paul design is allegedly a ripoff of a design by little-known luthier O.W. Appleton, who claimed to, in 1943, have presented Gibson with this rather Les Paul-shaped guitar, don't you think? For this segment, I've also enlisted the help of a few Reddit comments. I won't read those out loud so as to not waste your time, but if you want to read them, here they are. The way Fender handles this exact same situation is much more graceful in my personal opinion, because while Strat-shaped guitars are a dime a dozen, I've been seeing this thing in my nightmares, I swear to God. If you ask anyone where to buy a high-quality Strat from, they'll say Fender. I'm not a shill, I promise, just please. Alright, while stealing isn't really the correct term to use here, since likely all they did was offer greedy musicians more money than companies whose products they'd previously been endorsing, suing a smaller company and then taking arguably their most popular signature artist away from them is, in my humblest of opinions, A dick move in the equivalent of punching someone in the gut and then taking their wallet. I mean, Gibson's roster of signature artists was impressive enough to begin with, you know? Tony Iommi, Jerry Cantrell, Slash, Noel Gallagher, Kirk Douglas, Jimi Hendrix, Les Paul, Tom Petty, Joe Perry, B.B. King, Chuck Berry, Adam Jones, Dave Amato, Jared James Nichols. Some of those collaborations date back as far as the 1950s, the 1980s. However, clearly, that wasn't enough for Gibson, as more recently they got Metallica's Kirk Hammett and Dave Mustaine of Megadeth to drop their long-standing brand deals with ESP and Dean Guitars respectively to endorse Gibson products, as well as in Mustaine's case, Gibson's corollary brand Kramer Guitars, to create a set of guitars that quite frankly look like something you'd find up for sale on AliExpress. Man, does Gibson love to buy up other companies. I won't make a big thing out of this, here's just a quick list of some of the companies that Gibson has acquired in the past. Steinberger, a company they've arguably ran into the ground, or at least such is the common consensus in the guitar community. Kramer Guitars, KRK Systems, their pro audio division, Tobias Bass Guitars, Maestro Guitars, and Mesa Boogie. Please don't hurt Mesa, Gibson, alright? They're good, please. Not much ambiguity in that title, is there? In 2009, a Gibson factory in the US was raided. Authorities found ebony woods Gibson had illegally imported from Madagascar via a German grey market dealer for ebony woods. The back and forth with the German dealer, as well as plans to get the wood through customs by mislabeling it, were found in emails from 2008 and 9. Now, mistakes happen, right? It's endangered wood. Who gives a shit about endangered wood? Not me. But here's the kicker. A subsequent raid in 2011 revealed more illegally imported wood, this time from India. Gibson denied any malpractice, and in the same year as the second raid, requested all the seized materials be returned back to them, a motion which the court denied, as it is the equivalent of being caught with a backpack full of cocaine and asking charges to be dropped and for your drugs back. Whether or not any of these actions were justified is entirely subjective, of course. Personally, I would have handled things a little differently, but I don't run a multi-million-dollar company whose sales have been on a steady decline for years and has had to file for bankruptcy protection. So let's get some of the more objective things out of the way, starting with... Back in the 1960s, Gibson was one of the sickest brands ever. They were on top of the world and nothing was going to take them down. These days they like to make guitars to commemorate the glory days, to reminisce, if you will, as opposed to spending time actually innovating and creating new, original concepts for guitars. Hey, remember the 60s? Yeah, those were the days, man. Now personally, I've never liked Gibson or Epiphone guitars for their sound, feeling, or playability really. However, I haven't let that affect what I say in this video, because this isn't a rant, it's a documentary. A way to record and capture the history, the activity, the life and times of Gibson, if you will. A common complaint with Gibson guitars, Les Pauls in particular, is their fragility. Boy, do those things like to break. Why is that? Well, Gibson carves their headstocks from the same slab of wood they use for the rest of the neck, meaning that, as opposed to most other guitars where headstocks are glued on, tension from the strings now no longer goes with the grain of the wood, but rather through it. Which is why occasionally, somewhere in the world, someone's very, very expensive Gibson Les Paul decides it has had enough of the constant temperature changes due to those cacophonic garage band practice sessions, and it beheads itself. Shame, really. Yet boomers and younger generations alike fetishize old Les Pauls because of who played them. I myself am very guilty of this with Fender guitars, of course, with the slight difference that the day I see a Strat shatter into 1,000 pieces from merely being looked at the wrong way is the day I eat my pants. However, by all means, continue to kneel at the altar of broken headstocks and vastly below average tuning stability if you must. I'm moving on from this topic and so should you. Gibson have in recent years embarked on a few very interesting sounding business ventures. Now I'm going to present these to you in order from least to most weird. Starting with Gibson's app. Gibson made a mobile app in 2021 claiming it is the only guitar app you need. The app has features like a pretty decent tuner, no worse or less accurate than your standard phone tuners like Guitar Tuner or the Boss Pedal Tuner app, although I wouldn't recommend those to anyone anyway if you can help it. A shop that's basically the appified version of any online-based Gibson vendor, an augmented reality song learning section, no doubt created by somebody who just assumed that that's what augmented reality means. A sort of skill tree for your learning progress, and easily the coolest and most unique feature of the app, free of charge one-on-one video consultations with qualified guitar techs. Only available to those who have a problem with their Gibson, Epiphone or Steinberger guitars. That one could have almost not been a bummer. I mean, I guess technically I could take advantage of that with my Beretta, but only with that. I'm not going to go into any more detail on the app since my favorite music-related YouTuber, KDH, has already made a very detailed and funny video on it. I'll put a link to that in the description or up there, you'll find it somewhere. Moving on to Gibson Records. Gibson recently started their own record label, Gibson Records, which according to them is going to work with Gibson artists in an artist-friendly partnership. Usually I'd say something snarky along the lines of taking lots of musicians' money is something that Gibson and most record labels have always had in common, but since they apparently aim to work with established Gibson artists as opposed to previously unsigned bands eager to sign any contract with the promise of making it big in the scene, I guess it's whatever. Slash and Miles Kennedy are going to publish their next joint effort via Gibson Records, so I guess let's see how it turns out and not jump to unnecessary conclusions based on past experience with Gibson. Alright, Gibson G3, this is where it gets interesting. G3, or the Gibson Generation Group, is, according to Gibson's website, the 2-year mentoring program for younger generations of guitar players. Now, apparently students enlisted in the 2-year program, alongside mentoring by qualified mentors, receive essentially all the benefits of a Gibson endorsement, which according to their website again, is being featured in and collaborating with Gibson TV, getting to preview new instruments before release, which is very exciting because Gibson is known to innovate and bring new things to the table with every new guitar release. And reach quote-unquote hundreds of millions of viewers globally. Now, I didn't fact-check that one because it is near impossible for me to see how many views Gibson videos have gotten across all platforms within their lifetimes. Now, I had originally prepared questions to interview at least one of the Gibson G3 students about the program simply due to the complete and utter lack of information about it on the internet. However, none, and I mean none, of the students to whom I reached out even so much as acknowledged my attempts. So there's only really one thing I can take away from this program, which is that it really gets to some kids' heads to be endorsed by a big brand like Gibson. I hope they enjoy it while it lasts. Alright, now we're getting to the real obscure shit. In 2021, Gibson partnered up with equity investment website Rally to sell shares of what they deem to be collectible items because they said so. More specifically, Gibson guitars. Yep. These specific guitars are a Slash 1966 EDS double neck prototype, an Adam Jones signature 1979 Les Paul Silverburst, and a Tony Iommi 1964 SG Special. The Slash signature double neck was fully funded within just a few days, racking up a total of $65,000 US from 561 investors. Now I know what you're probably thinking. Gibson slowly made the change from a guitar company to a lifestyle brand with such enticing products as this Gibson branded little shredder baby onesie, and they are now just turning into a private equity firm. And you would be correct. If you'll allow me to once again bring my own opinion into this, that's stupid. Selling shares in guitars is stupid. The guitar's being stored in some garage in Nashville, Tennessee, even if one person had technically bought 400 shares in it, thereby would own the majority because Gibson only owns 20%, is even more stupid, and the slogan "Own Your Share of Sound" is even more stupid. You will likely never get to see, hear, touch, or breathe near one of the guitars you've bought shares in. Also, allow me to illustrate how much of one of these guitars you would technically own with one share. So, open right now, I have the original Slash double neck SG auction listing thing. The price cap was at $65,000 US, as I mentioned earlier, and a single share cost $5 US. 65,000 divided by 5 is 13,000. A quick look on Wikipedia tells us that your average Gibson double neck SG was rounded up to 6 kilograms just for comfort. 6,000 divided by 13,000 is 0.46 grams, or this much of a guitar string. Yeah, that's worth $5. I mean, they're all a step ahead of me, clearly, because I don't have like a sixth of a guitar string that's stored somewhere in Nashville, Tennessee, so I guess they're the elite. Ah, prices. You were all waiting for this one. I know it. Gibson have been known to have an interesting idea of how much their gear is really worth, to say the least. Of course, overpriced is never the correct term to use unless products are not being purchased. Gibson is charging as much as they think buyers would be willing to pay, and it is sad to see that in most cases they're actually right. However, most of this value is merely the perceived value in the eyes of the consumer because there is a shiny Gibson decal on the headstock. Something that is only really impressive if the headstock manages to stay on the guitar, but I won't get into that again. But what if I told you you could have another major brand's guitar with essentially the exact same specs for about a third of the price of any given Gibson guitar? And no, I'm not even talking about heritage guitars. Those are even too similar to Gibson. We're going completely away from Gibson to a company that they once sued. So right here earlier I just chose a Les Paul that seemed very, very oddly expensive to me. This one clocking in at pretty much exactly 6 grand, in euro that is, it's much more in US dollars. And I took a look at some of the features, besides the famed maple top. Mahogany body, mahogany neck, 22 frets, 2 humbuckers, maple top, rosewood fretboard, 628mm scale, no tremolo, and a sunburst finish. We're going for something along those lines from a major manufacturer. So, right here, after entering all that criteria into Thomann, I found the PRS S2 Makati with a mahogany body, a maple top, a mahogany neck, a rosewood fretboard, 624mm scale, 22 frets, 2 humbuckers, no tremolo, instead a 2 pneumatic style bridge, and dark cherry sunburst for just about 2 grand. I mean, I know the humbuckers aren't exactly the same, but apparently PRS's single cut models were similar enough for Gibson to sue them. So I feel like this, with the exact same specs as the other one for 6 grand, yeah, you can kind of make a few sacrifices so as to not have to spend 6 grand. And you know what? I'm pretty sure the headstock's going to stay on this one. In summary, is Gibson a tyrant, a corporate bully just out to sue any company they can to make some more money? For legal reasons, absolutely not. What Gibson is, though, is a company that slowly lost all of its passion for creating premium and superior instruments and instead has become all about acquiring more companies, expanding to compete in every nook and cranny of the music industry, and most importantly, sell as many guitars as possible before everybody catches on and it's too late. Thank you so much for watching this video. A lot of work went into it. This was a lot of effort, but it's also a topic I've been very passionate about for a long time. If you enjoyed the video, then consider hitting the like button. Also, you can subscribe somewhere down there. Last week's video is somewhere up here. Thank you so much. I'll see you next week.